just make
Yeah.
sure the stream is working.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Stream starts.
Everything
Yeah,
okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
everything's fine. Thanks.
Good evening. Welcome to Homes and Safe Communities Scrutiny Committee, Wednesday, the 10th of April 2024. It's 6 p.m, so the meeting is starting. May I remind everyone present that this hybrid meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording archived for future viewing. If a participant wishes to speak, can they please raise their hand in person if sat in the chamber, or use the remote raised hand function located in the bottom left hand of the screen. This will put you in the speaker queue accordingly. When subsequently invited to address by myself, please then press your activation button in the bottom centre of your screen. Please be patient and aware that there will be Please be patient and aware that there will be a small time lag and that you do not need to press the button again. The response of the system is not instant. If the button or desk microphone changes to red, then it has responded. If a participant raises their hand via the remote function and is not subsequently invited to address by myself, please could they turn their camera on to indicate or place a message in the chat function. When invited to address by myself, please could all participants ensure that their microphone and camera is on to ensure that they can be seen and heard when actively participating. If this is not possible for any reason, please bring this to the attention of myself and or the Democratic Services Officer as soon as possible. Once you have participated, please remember to turn your activation button off as not to delay other participants from coming onto screen and to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function may only be used to highlight any technical issues and or to grab the attention of myself or the Democratic Services Officer. If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when they are addressing the committee, then they should let myself or the Democratic Services Officer know. If a remote committee member has a prejudicial interest and is therefore required to withdraw from the meeting, the Democratic Services Officer will place the participant in the virtual waiting room until such time that the interested item has concluded. Please do not close your browser. Please do not close your browser window whilst in the waiting room, as a Democratic Services Officer will bring you back into the meeting automatically when appropriate. For members attending the meeting in person with a prejudicial interest, they will be asked to leave the chamber for the duration of the interesting item and will be invited back into the room as appropriate. If an electronic vote is called during the course of the meeting, then advice on how to participate will be given accordingly to committee members with voting rights at that time. That's the housekeeping done and dusted. Let's move on to agenda item 1, apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair. Just to say that it's we've only got one apologies tonight from Councillor Campbell. Other than that, all the rest of the members are either online or in the chamber.
Thank you. So agenda item 2 is the minutes of the meeting held on 7th of February and the 4th of March 2024. Are we happy with the minutes? Councillor Edwards? Yes?
Happy to second. Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you. Item number 3, to receive declarations of interest and the nature of such interests. Are there any declarations? Oh, Councillor Payne has her hand up. Councillor Payne?
Thank you, Chair. Can I declare on item 4, please? I have dispensation to speak and vote. As I am employed by Llamau, I do not anticipate anything contentious in the presentation, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. And do we have any other declarations? I see no other hands up. So with that, I will hand you over to the team from Llamau and Platform for the presentation. Take it away, ladies.
Hi there. My name is Katie and I am the service manager for a brand new project within Platform called The Sanctuary. And are we going ahead with the right? Okay. So, yeah, basically I'm the Sanctuary Service Manager.
And I'm Taylor. I'm the Service Manager for Vale Supported Housing in the Vale.
Okay, so just a little bit of overview of who we are as a mental health charity. So Platform is the mental health charity and social change charity. Platform has 30 years experience of working in partnership with statutory services to achieve sustainable outcomes for people with complex mental health needs. We have delivered crisis services, including the C&V Crisis House since 2006. We live by our values of being connected, compassionate, brave and curious in everything we do, and believe deeply in our vision of sustainable well-being for all. This is just a bit of an overview of some of our other projects in the Vale. This evening, me and Taylor will touch on more of the projects that we manage personally, but this is just something that everyone can look back on, and if there's any questions at the end about other projects, we'll share that information if we know. So we've got a few crisis houses, Linden House being one, which is in Whitchurch. And that's a 24-hour crisis house, and people stay up to 2 weeks. We also have one in Newport. We also have the Hangout. That's a drop-in service for young people that are struggling with their mental health. That's in Cardiff. And yes, there's many other on there. I won't take too long going into detail with that. So what we'll do now is we'll talk more about our individual projects of what we're mainly here for this evening. So I'll hand it over to Taylor because she is the service manager for supported housing.
So as Kate's touched upon, we do have a number of supported housing schemes within the Vale. And we've recently obtained a 24-hour supported accommodation, which houses 7 people. And this is to support people who are experiencing mental health difficulties and tenancy-related issues. Then we have our Home Street and Windsor Road support accommodation, which is staffed between the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m, which is really beneficial now because we can use it as like a step-down approach for those that don't necessarily need the 24-hour support, but could still benefit from supported accommodation. We then have our dispersed scheme, which is supported accommodation out in the community. So it's blocks of flats, and we have like a single flat that we house the person in. We will work alongside the IRIS team in the NHS, and they help the person to access the community more than we sort of can. They're like a rehab sort of team. And then we then do have our floating support scheme, which would then support people out in the community or those that have left our support accommodation. So we have a really good sort of step-down approach so the individuals aren't left on their own when they move out with the support accommodation, having that full-time support. So it works really beneficial and we do have really positive outcomes.
Apologies for that. So I'll talk a little bit about the Sanctuary now, which is a brand new project. We are an out-of-hours service that offers support for people in a crisis. We take referrals from 111 Press 2 currently, but hopefully in the future there will be room to expand. We open between the hours of 5 and 1 a.m. So the idea and the concept is to prevent people going to A&E, to have that middle ground where they can come and regulate and hopefully get the support they need without it escalating to something a lot more serious. We're currently only operating a soft launch and providing telephone support. We are opening at the end of the month face-to-face, which is very exciting. And what we'll do is we'll take referrals from 111 Press 2 and they will be booked in with us to come and visit the hub, which is currently in Cardiff. We cover the whole Cardiff and the Vale, but the hub is in Cardiff. So just a little bit about what we do. So we provide social and emotional and practical support to people experiencing challenges with the mental health and emotional well-being. So it's a 7 days a week project, 365 days of the year. Again, I've said 5 till 1 a.m. So our aim is to provide a safe, welcoming space where people can go outside of the normal working hours, because we know that these services are very limited. There's a lot of support that people can reach out to during the day, but in the evening, there's a huge barrier with this. So to provide this, we will initially phone the individual and offer them a face-to-face appointment. And if that's their choice to do so, we will give them a time slot, and they can come in, and we will have lots of things to offer them, from one-to-one support to arts and crafts, many different things. We're currently setting it up, which is very exciting, and getting lots in the building that are offer a variety of things for people to do. And yeah, hopefully it will be successful. And we've all really worked really hard. We're all a brand new team, and it's going really well so far, and we've had a lot of great feedback. So the process, just to give you a little background in that. So the mental health team, through 111 Press 2, refer individuals to us that are in certain categories that fall in a C and D category. So it's people in a mental health crisis that don't deem emergency services. And the other concept that we will strongly try to aim for is that we will sit down with these individuals and we will talk to them about other signposting that we can help them with. Because we know that it's easy to access these services in the day, but when they're in crisis and they think about the help that they need, it is within the evening. So I'm trying to make a strong connection. The team is trying to make a strong connection with other agencies to be able to, refer these people on to the help that they need. So I think I have touched on majority of that new project. There is a lot to talk about, but yeah, so I've touched on most of the points there. But obviously, if there's any questions at the end, that would be fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I can see Councillor Aviat has her hands up, but we're going to go into the Llamau part now. So I will bring you in afterwards, Councillor Aviat.
Please bear with us. We're just setting up now the presentation for the Llamau part of this item.
Good evening, and thank you very much for having Llamau here today. My name is Yvonne Connolly and I am Operational Director for Llamau. So Llamau is a homelessness charity. We're very close, not that you'd think, to our 40th birthday. And we've supported in that time over 100,000 young people, women and families who experience homelessness. So our vision is really quite simple, and that is that no young person, woman or family should ever experience homelessness. And our mission is even more simple in terms of to eradicate that. The challenge itself, however, is quite stark ahead of us to do that. So as an organisation, we're extremely values-led in the same way as my colleagues of Platform have presented today. So it's really important to us that we lead in all aspects of our work and our lives with these values. So that's to learn, to encourage, to respect, and to listen. Most importantly, is we never give up. Sometimes that can be really challenging, and I know that we often push heavy on doors, but it's really important to us that we never give up, both from a point of view of the people that we're really privileged to support, but also for the wider social injustices that we often see people experience by the time that they come to be supported by ourselves. We are Pan Wales, but I do need to give a little nod that I've been with the organisation about 1.5 years, but in asking colleagues who've been with us a little bit longer, I am told that the acorn was planted in the Vale of Glamorgan for Llamau, and in particular here in Barry. So it was one of our very first projects. So it soon too will be celebrating its 40th birthday. But we have a host of projects here in the Vale. We have a number of supported accommodation projects for young people. So that's our T. John Rowley, T. Newid, T. Dillon. We also have supported lodgings, education services, early intervention services, and floating support. And that also includes a demographic of specialist substance misuse services. So, you know, the Vale, in all honesty, is our blueprint for how we feel it should be done in terms of prioritising early intervention and prevention at the forefront of everything, in terms of how we work with people to avoid the experience and the trauma of homelessness. Where intervention is required, that we provide that in the communities that people are really rooted within, so that we can, particularly for our young people, we can keep those connections to education services, to family, to that wider world in which we want them to move on and flourish again within. And then there are some specialist support where we recognise people need those tailored support, whether it be in terms of substance misuse or education services that we have here. So for those that don't know, a huge amount of the work around homelessness support services is really rooted now in what we call a psychologically informed environment. So it's more commonly referred to as PI. And really that's about us all being really aware of, most importantly, the impact of trauma on people. And the vast majority of people who experience homelessness will have extensive trauma in their background and adverse childhood experiences. So we know from our own statistics and the work that we've done with our young people is that 90% have experienced one adverse childhood experience. So that could be in terms of abuse, neglect, family breakdown, a whole host of adverse childhood experiences. And we know from our research across Wales, actually, the more adverse childhood experiences that people have in their lives, the more difficult in terms of stability and integration into wider community their journey can be. So that we know 3 or more young people will experience 8 adverse childhood experiences within their services. 60% will have witnessed abuse within the family. So there's quite a lot that goes on for the young people that experiences that come to us in terms of homelessness support. And I think it's fair to say that often many of them have had a really rough journey. And a huge amount of the work that you will do when you work with young people is to repair relationships that you've never really been part of. So it's a huge amount of understanding and that creating that psychological safety within our services. So, and this is a little bit about how we do it in terms of our model of support and our values. So that's just the next slide. Thank you. So we very much look at this from a point of view of stages, and I'll talk individually about the stages as we go forward in the presentation, but we really recognise personal security and understanding what that looks like, the power of making sense and developing skills, the real joy in having new experiences, and then ensuring that actually there's always plans for the future and what that looks like for our young people and those that we support. So in a little bit more detail, that creating security, you know, that's really individual. That's about getting to know someone. That's about that routine, that rhythm, that regulation. And we've done that for years here in the Vale by ensuring that people feel really welcomed, ensuring that the staff that they meet really work in a person-centred way in terms of being empathetic and listening, but also recognise that actually for a lot of young people and the people that we support in the other services, is that actually that will also include financial security. And that will also include settling within services. So really, that's what we like to do to start. We like to say, welcome, we're really, really privileged that you've come to stay. This is your home, and how can we help to make you feel safe? In the wider context, then, the specialist support planning and work will happen around looking at what that individual needs within either their accommodation or within the step down and move on support that we've got. We also have access to a clinical psychology team within the organisation that provides reflective practice. It also provides one-to-one support for young people and those that access the wider mainstream support services. We also provide mediation. So one of the things that we really put an emphasis on, particularly with our young people, is about repairing networks and relationships and skills. Quite a lot of young people will go on to thrive in an independent living situation, but what we really hope and try and support to do is that actually they can also repair those wider family and network relationships that are really important as people transition into adulthood, and it helps them understand also around what healthy relationships look like. Then we look around multi-agency collaboration and system navigation, and we work with wonderful partners like the ladies here from Platform today around bringing in services, around ensuring that people feel really connected to what's available in terms of their individual support needs. Particularly something I'm really passionate about is we talk a lot about dreams and hopes and really start building in a conversation that often hasn't been there. So really starting on that work around what it looks like then in terms of wider move on, what it looks like to overcome the barriers that have either stopped them in terms of living independently or have in terms of the more specialist services, in terms of substance use or mental health, actually things that have deterred them then in terms of healthy living. We also have a real big emphasis in terms of education, employment and training. So that's the idea coming from a long-term support environment is diversionary activities, and it's time. It's about purpose. It's about people. It's about relationships and creating that wider security. So it's not just about accommodation or the language that can often be quite negative around temporary accommodation. It really is about a holistic way to feel at home, to feel supported, but also to start developing new skills. And it's also the chance to try new experiences. Maybe not so often here in the Vale in terms of bringing young people to the beach, because you're very lucky that we have a lot of beaches here. But we often will take young people up to Brecon. We'll take them to places across Wales. We'll take them to museums they've never been to, theatre shows. And a lot of that is again built in that idea of dreams and aspirations. But there's something really important about new experiences, particularly when you work with young people. And that is also the safe space to fail. And really what we want to do is for young people to try things in a safe way, and that we can work with them to understand the context of their own safety and decision making around that. So that's that family environment, that's that world that says it's okay to be young, it's okay to explore. That's what we're here to do, to try and protect you within that, but also allow you to experience the world and to dream and aspire within that. And then it's about becoming independent. And a huge amount of that, as I've talked about, is around relationships, purpose, it's around aspirations, about building and holding hope. But it's also in the wider context of the world that we're living in. It's about getting access to the right accommodation in terms of move on and transition. It's about ensuring the wider services that are out there in the community, that people are linked in. We work primarily with a cohort of young people that often don't fit very neatly either in young people services nor in adult services, because they're 18, 19 or 20, and the thresholds for their accessibility has really changed without often young people knowing about it. We work also in the Vale with a large number of young people who are leaving the care system. So actually those wider networks can often be quite fragmented and challenging in terms of where they live in terms of independent living and move on. So a little bit then, once it's all done, and I feel like looking at this is a bit of an eye test, so apologies to anyone who can't see it, but I'll read a little about. So these are our outcomes in the Vale, and in particular about how Llamai measures our outcomes. It's through the voice of the people who use our services. We do have obviously the wider HSG framework, but one of the things for us that's really important is that we are informed by the evidence from those that experience our services. So 100% of people who responded in the Vale to our outcome survey last year told us they felt that the support had been helpful. 100% of them said that they felt that the support was really important to them. And 100% felt that they felt really involved in the decisions around them, and they felt more able to make better decisions for their lives. 90% said that they felt safer as a result of the support, and 98% of respondents said that they feel that Llamai has helped them in terms of their wider mental health and well-being. As a quote from one young person who said, "My support worker has been amazing. I've had a lot of help and support, and my support worker was highly recommended to me by a friend, and I couldn't ask for anything better." a little bit more in terms of feedback from the next slide, in terms of our young people and what they tell us. Particularly, it's about that sense of safety. So I feel safer and I have people supporting me and I know where to go if I need help. The support has made me become a lot more independent and helped me stand on my own 2 feet. So all of those goals and aims that we try and achieve for young people and those that also access our specialist support here in Vale, they are telling us that this is some of the impact of the work that we do. But we're not complacent. There's a lot of work to be done. The environment is extremely challenging. And some of the things that we're really seeing, in particular in our work in the Vale, is the wider challenges around safeguarding, particularly contextual safeguarding and safeguarding of our young adolescents and those transitioning into adulthood. We're also seeing a really complexity of need growing, and a huge amount of that is the need to access multiple support networks and services at the same time. And that's really challenging in an environment where actually, as the last point refers to, is the accessibility and the thresholds for those services, particularly those statutory services, are becoming harder and harder to reach. And actually, if our work is all about preventing the crisis, it's really difficult then to operate in an environment that only serves at point of crisis. It wouldn't be fair to not raise the point that funding is proving really challenging, really, really difficult environment. We have a huge amount of our sector, it's not just an organisation point of view, leaving for like 25p, 50p more an hour. You know, and for me, it's such a skilled work. It's such a skilled labour to do. And it's really important that actually we start recognising that within our funding models, to ensure that actually, if we're really, really committed to ensuring that our future generations have every opportunity ahead of them, then they actually have the skills and the workforce there to do it. And move on. So access to accommodation is always a challenge. And that is also about the access to the right type of accommodation in the right area. If you've done all of this work in terms of independent living, in terms of safe decision making, in terms of integration back into family and community, you know, the accommodation that doesn't help that, support that, that's perhaps in areas that perhaps previously were really challenging, makes move on really difficult. And indeed, just the actual availability of accommodation makes it really difficult. But you know, we're really proud of our history here in the Vale and our roots as a whole organisation. You know, we are now a Pan-Wales organisation, and we certainly feel that the model here in the Vale is one that informs all of our wider work as an organisation. So thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies, for that. Yes, if you'd like to come in.
Oh, hi, for everyone who doesn't know me, my name is Hedman John. I'm the Supporting People Team Coordinator for the Vale. Just to obviously follow up the presentation there by Platform and Llamai, just wanted to just basically to talk a little bit about the role that the Vale of Morgan Council plays in terms of commissioning services. The Supporting People Team in the Housing Department, our role is to administer the Housing Support Grant. We commission these services out to our support providers, and of course we carry out ongoing monitoring of these services. And I just want to touch upon a bit about what Taylor said about the new platform project in East Quay in Barry. It's a very exciting new project that was recently launched back in November. It's a 7-bed project, so there's capacity for 7 people. And it's our first 24-hour supported accommodation of its type in the Vale. Historically, we inherited some older projects, Home Street and Windsor Road, which, due to their configuration, we were never able to get them to operate staffed 24 hours. And as part of my role and my team's role in the council, is to carry out ongoing needs mapping and needs assessments to look at what services are needed, to see if we can identify any gaps in services. And one of the major gaps that we identified was that the existing service provision struggled to meet the needs of people with higher mental health issues, more significant issues. Home Street and Windsor Road wasn't really equipped to deal with those higher support levels. So that's why we went out and commissioned the new service, and working in partnership with United Welsh Housing Association, who were responsible for developing the building. And obviously, it's a key step up in terms of the provision that we as a council, in conjunction with our partners, are able to offer, because it works as homelessness prevention. It works in several different ways in terms of people who may be leaving hospital accommodation. It's not always appropriate to place people straight into their own tenancy. It's often not suitable to place people into standard temporary accommodation with no support. So that's where East Quay is able to provide that service to meet the needs of those vulnerable people. But I would stress that it is temporary accommodation, so it's not a permanent setting. We aim to have people move on within 2 years or sooner if that's at all possible, and then have them move on into their own independent accommodation. And then we basically have a gateway system that the Supporting People team runs. So what we basically do is we try to have a seamless transition then, so that people who are moving out of that accommodation can have floating support out into the community, so that they aren't left to fend themselves after they've successfully moved on. They can have ongoing support to meet their needs, because even, it's a big adjustment to potentially move from hospital setting to a supported accommodation setting, and then to independent living setting. And then that support then, floating support was what we call it, can signpost to other agencies, help integrate the people into the community, and get people to build that confidence. And of course, it can work in reverse as well. East Quay's Own is a brand new service. It's only been open, 6 months now, but there's also a possibility for people who are vulnerable out in the community. We've done it with Home Street and Windsor Road on occasion. If they're struggling with a tenancy, we have moved people into supported for a temporary supported, sort of short period, to develop the living skills and the confidence, and then move them back out. So it's a two-way process, really. And I just wanted to stress the important role of the local authority working in partnership with our providers for delivering that, and the fact that the funding comes from the housing support grant, which we as local authority administer on behalf of the Welsh Government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, do we have any questions? I will bring in Julie Aviat in a second. So, Councillor Aviat, would you like to come in? We can't hear you.
Sorry, first of all, I'd like to ask the ages that Lamai and platform, what age is it from and to?
Our support accommodation is from 18 plus up until sort of we see fit. We have had people up to like 70, so it just sort of depends on
so that's
needs.
Platform.
Yeah.
That's platform. And do Lamai automatically put them onto platform if they think that your service, if they think they think that your service can help them?
So it's really important that actually, sorry.
So yeah, do they go through to Lamai first to get your services?
So in terms of supported accommodation for young people, the vast majority of our accommodation is 16 to 21. It does go up to 25. Where there are additional support services needed, then yes, we will link people into those services, make referrals, work in a multidisciplinary way here in the Vale. We also have our additional, what we call our TESS contracts, and they are services for adults in the community. So it's a floating support model, and that's working with anyone from an 18 plus in terms of already within their tenancy. And some of those services specialise with those that experience substance misuse challenges.
Thank you. Chair, can I just ask one more, please? I don't know if it's for Lamai or platform, but where possible, before the young people or any people have to be, they need to be rehoused, who tries to prevent them from leaving home in the first place? Do you work with the families to try and keep them at home in the first place? Thank you.
Yeah, so in the Vale, we do have a family mediation service here. So that's really important. So that's really important of our early intervention and prevention model. So the idea there is that those services work with both the young person and the family to rebuild, repair relationships. The idea is that that's much earlier in that journey. It can be a point that some people will still need to come in terms of supported accommodation, and that will be through a housing homelessness assessment route. But the focus is always about where it's safe to do so, to try and support young people to return home. It's unfortunately not always safe to do so. So then it's also about supporting those relationships to be healthy and safe as best as possible. But yeah, the Vale do commission us to provide early intervention, family mediation services here in the Vale.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Lloyd Selby.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentations from the teams this evening. Really interesting to hear about the really important work that's being done to support young people. My question is about the new service that Platform are providing. Unless I misunderstood it, is it the case that the face-to-face aspect of the service for young people in crisis, that's only available in Cardiff? And if I'm right on that, you know, I'm conscious that travel can be a barrier. We know, don't we, that services support as close to home as possible mean that people are more likely to be able to access them. So if that service is only available in Cardiff, what steps will you take to monitor take-up from young people, young adults in the Vale who may need to benefit it?
Hi there. So just to touch on, it's definitely something that we've discussed quite extensively, that the travel would be an issue because we cover the whole of the Cardiff and the Vale, of course. Obviously, the hub is in Cardiff, and somebody living at Roos, say at 11 o'clock at night, that doesn't drive and they have no means of getting to us. So within the budget, I didn't mention that we are funded by the Health Board. Within the budget, we do have a small pot of money that in extreme circumstances can be offered for transport. So we're looking to get a connection maybe with a taxi service for that. But we are also trying to get some extra funding for exactly that, and doing our own fundraising as well for travel and transport for people, because we do know that is a huge barrier that we're going to face. The hub at the moment is in Cardiff, and that's obviously been funded for a couple of years through the Health Board. We're adults only, but just to give you an example, that we do have a younger people's service, the Hangout. They've got a hub in Cardiff, and they've just been given, because that's been so successful and that's only been open around a year, they have just been given more funding to open a location in Barry. So hopefully, in the future, as the sanctuary grows for older, for adults, there may be more assistance with that, and we may be able to expand. But it's definitely something that we're working on towards, to make sure that people that barrier won't be in place for people, because we know we're definitely going to face that.
Thank you.
Councillor Morgan, if you'd like to come in.
Well, thank you for both those presentations. I've certainly learned a lot about the work that Platform and Lamar do. My question, though, is for Platform. You mentioned that you get referrals from NHS 111, and upon receipt of a referral, you would contact somebody by telephone. What if you can't get hold of them, or if they're not responsive? Is there something to follow up situations, or do you assess the degree of crisis that might be involved? Because you might have somebody elderly, you might have somebody deaf, you might have somebody with communication problems. So how do you follow up if you don't get that response straight away?
Hello. So basically, we've got a process where, I'm not sure if you've heard of the Colgate system. So 111 Press 2 use the system A to G, I believe that it goes to. So A and B would be that they need immediate assistance within immediate or within 4 hours. So that is ambulance, police. So they would not refer somebody in such a severe crisis to us. So we take C and D, as I mentioned previously. And they are people in crisis, but necessarily aren't actively suicidal, and another number of other factors. So we will call them if they do not answer. Well, first of all, I'll just briefly go through the referral process. We receive the call from 111 Press 2. We fill out the referral form, and they give us as much information on the person in crisis as possible. We also are currently in the process of getting access to the Paris system, which the health board use to access people's medical records and things, so we can then search that person and have more of an in-depth search on, you know, the type of medication they're taking and their history. So that will be really beneficial. And the information, obviously, that have been given from the operator at 111 Press 2. So we're not going in blind as such. We do have a lot of information given us prior to phoning them. So our aim is to phone them back within half an hour. If they don't answer, we wait 15 minutes and we try again. If they don't answer, we hand that back to 111 Press 2 and inform them that that's we've attempted a couple of times, and then we hand it back basically. There's not really much else we can do in regards to that. So if that answers your question, it is very frustrating when we can't get hold of them, obviously, because we want to help. But it may change slightly when we open face-to-face, I think, because we'll be offering them something more, and the operator will tell them that prior to the phone call. At the moment, they're having support from the 111 Press 2 operators, and then they're having telephone support with us. So it's kind of a double whammy there. So I think as soon as they know that there's potentially somewhere that they can come in, hopefully it'll spark a bit more interest. But the phone calls have been successful, but I think this is just the next step that we need to take that definitely will help people. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions? Okay. Mike, if you'd like to come in.
Yeah, it's just a contribution really rather than a question, Chair. There are some points being made today about resources and funding. Clearly, members will be aware that we will be bringing a report back to Scrutiny Committee in relation to the welcome news that Welsh Government identified additional funding to try and meet the challenges, some of the challenges that were mentioned this evening in relation to the living wage and trying to create that sort of long-term career opportunity for people. We recognise locally, in the same way as social care, that those roles should be extremely well valued and recognised in terms of the importance that they do. And I think that's been amplified today by the contributions from the two organisations and the people that have spoken. And a point was made earlier around prevention. Clearly, as a council, we understand the challenges that we are facing as a statutory organisation and the challenges we face over our budgets. And I know members will have gone through some painful conversations and discussions over the last few months as we've set our budget for next year, which again will be extremely challenging environment. But just to pick up on the point that was made around prevention, I think we all recognise that prevention is far better than dealing with people in crisis. Dealing with people in crisis is very costly, not only to local authorities, to other statutory agencies, but more importantly to the individuals themselves in terms of their own health, well-being, mental health and well-being. To reflect on a report that you had recently before Christmas, I think it was, in relation to the children and young persons strategy, which came to this committee. You'll reflect that that strategy also highlights the importance of prevention and early intervention, also the trauma-informed approach that has been discussed today. And it's just to say that in terms of our work as a statutory organisation, as a council, together then with our third sector partners, the value of our third sector partners who provide services on the council's commission behalf are invaluable, and particularly the relationships we've adopted and formed with Platform and Llamai. As I say, just a comment really.
Thank you, Mike. I see nobody else wishing to speak, so I will move on to the recommendation. And the recommendation is that committee note this report. We haven't had any recommendations come out of the discussion, so it's we would just note the presentation. Are we happy with that recommendation?
Yes, Chair.
Okay. Okay, so before I go on to the next item, I just want to say thank you for you ladies and the rest of the team for coming in. Very informative. I do have a couple of questions myself, but I will be in contact with you afterwards. So thank you very, very much for your time tonight. You are free to stick around, okay, but you are also free to leave and enjoy the rest of the evening if you wish. Thank you. So next item is agenda item 5, which are changes to the Welsh Housing Quality Standards of 2023. We have, I believe this is you and Andrew today, isn't it, Mike? Are you taking the lead on this today?
Yes, it is. Okay. Chair. I'll take the lead, and Andrew will take over in terms of the detail of WHQS 23. Just to say that this is the first report that we've brought in front of members in the council in relation to the new Welsh Housing Quality Standards. Just a brief history. This council achieved WHQS in 2018 in terms of the initial Welsh Housing Quality Standard. Within the body of the report, there's an indication in relation to what that looked like in terms of achieving the standard, and also in terms of the 23 standard, the new requirements on the local authority going forward up to 2034. Members will see that there are some quite challenging areas within the standard, both in terms of delivery, but more importantly in terms of resourcing. And again, I think I referred to this in our conversations and discussions regarding the rent setting report that we had a few months ago now, and the challenges of both meeting the standard itself, but also the challenge of also building the additional accommodation in the right place at the right time, which again was also mentioned today in the earlier report. I think I'll leave it there now. I think it's in terms of guidance, in terms of achieving WHQS 23, that guidance is changing as we get to understand some of the complexities of the standard. So, for example, the recent guidance, most recent guidance, I think, was issued in March, and is likely to change as we adopt the standard and we implement that. But if I can hand you over to Andrew Treweek. Andrew is our operational manager for building services. Andrew's responsible not only for the landlord service in relation to the direct delivery of our repairs and maintenance service, but also our asset management and our housing investment programme. So if I can hand over to Andy, and Andy can update on the report.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike. Fairly well briefed introduction there, and as you quite rightly said, we achieved WHQS in 2018, and since that point we have been in what is known as the maintenance phase. Welsh Government are now keen to take WHQS to the next level. And have introduced the next incarnation of the Welsh Housing Quality Standard. The standard builds on the previous standard, so all of the key factors that were in there around having decent kitchens, bathrooms, a house that is safe and well maintained still remain. The new standard begins to focus more on decarbonisation of the housing stock, as well as some other modifications that have been made to the standard. As you will see within the report, there are some key dates which will need to be made and achieved. The first one of which is around achieving what is known as the passport into decarbonisation. And that requires all of our properties to have been visited and surveyed to undertake what is termed a past 2035 survey, which essentially is, if members are aware of the old EPC, or still current, that's a rating of the energy efficiency of individual homes. The past 2035 builds upon that and seeks to identify a range of measures which can be undertaken to that property in a particular sequence over a particular time period to get that property up to the best performance it possibly can be. So all of our houses will need to undergo a survey to get to a picture, to begin to build a picture of what we need to do to our housing stock. That will need to be achieved by 2027, which is the first milestone, really in beginning to deliver WHQS 2. The next milestone is to achieve SAP 75. Again, another term that members might not be aware of, but measurement of the energy efficiency of properties is measured through a standard assessment procedure, otherwise known as SAP, and it's rated from 1 to 100. And so SAP 75 is sort of 3/4 of the way through that assessment. Ultimately, the Welsh Government is looking to take all properties up to a SAP level of 92, which in terms of efficiency is getting towards as efficient as it possibly can be. But the first stage of that journey is to achieve SAP 75 by 2030. Just by way of indication, the current housing stock sits at SAP 72.5, so we are 2.5 points away from actually achieving our first objective, which is for 2030. The next milestone for achievement is to, as I alluded to earlier on, is to get to SAP 92, which is an EPC band A, and is really at the top end of energy efficiency for home users. That end date has been set at 2034. Which is 10 years away from where we are now. But as has already been covered tonight, there is a resource issue that is associated with actually getting to that particular level. We've made an initial assessment of our properties from where they are now to where we would need to get them. and we estimate that that particular work to individual properties is going to be in the region of about £50,000. We've already started the journey of doing Fabric First, and Fabric First includes all the topping up the roof insulation and external wall insulation. We're also replacing windows and doors as and when programmes are needed. But there's a lot more that will need to be done because we will need to start looking at decarbonised fuels. So that's going to be potentially ground source heat pumps, air source heat pumps, infrared, and various renewable energy heating sources. We haven't commenced that yet because we're waiting to see how the technology develops and see if there's any further improvements that can be made to delivering that, because at the end of the day, we are a landlord and we don't want to be plunging our tenants into fuel poverty unnecessarily. And electric heating, by its sheer nature, can be relatively expensive to operate. So we need to make sure we get the measures right, we get them sequenced right, and that we try and support our tenants as much as possible. And in that support, quite clearly, solar is going to be an attribute that we'll install wherever it's possible, because that will bring down some of the running costs. And we're also looking at some battery technology as well, which will help support that household's running costs when the daylight is no longer available. Generally, people tend to use more electric at night when it does get colder. The nights are darker during the winter, and we want to make sure that we can provide that benefit wherever we possibly can. So there's a range of technologies that we will be looking to install. As I say, that cost is estimated at around £50,000 per property. In total, we've got 4,000 properties, and you don't need to be a mathematician to work out that £50,000 by 4,000 properties gives a total bill in the region of £200 million over the next 10 years, which we have not factored into our business plan. One of the reasons that we were keen to invest in the rents as much as we possibly did this year was because we knew that we had some gaps and a massive challenge in actually getting to get our energy usage down in all of our properties. So Welsh Government are well aware that that is going to be a challenge, and they are also aware that not every local authority and social landlord will be able to achieve the standard by their preferred target date of 2034. And I'm sure that there will be some conversations as we start to develop the plan and understand what is needed to be invested later on down the line. And that target date of 2034 may need to be stretched. That's notwithstanding that there is quite clearly a climate emergency. So this work does need to be undertaken, but it also needs to be affordable. And the one thing we don't want to be doing is ploughing ahead, investing money into our housing stock that doesn't deliver the results that we are expecting in thermal efficiency and decarbonisation, and at the same time plunging our tenants into fuel poverty. So there is a range of work to be undertaken to actually get us on that journey. The WHQS, initial WHQS requirements still stay there. So things like kitchens and bathrooms are still on a plan that we have. And we commenced WHQS 1 in 2012. Kitchens are on a 15-year life cycle. So by 2027, we will start with the first kitchen replacements being eligible within our investment programme. And we need to understand how that actually plays in, because the kitchens, one aspect of the standard is for them to be 15 years, so that's classed as being old, but they also have to be in poor condition. And to make sure that we make the best out of the investment that is available to us, we will be looking to make sure that we aren't replacing kitchens unnecessarily. There's an environmental impact in that as well, a sustainable impact. So there will be further surveys that will be undertaken of those kitchens and other attributes in properties to make sure that we're replacing them at the right time and in the right sequence. WHQS2 also introduces a couple of other things into the requirements which weren't there before, not least of which is that we are now required to provide floor coverings at void turnover. So all of our voids moving forward will actually have some form of carpeting or vinyl laid to all of the rooms, as that's the bedrooms, the living rooms, hall stairs and landing. We currently are required to provide floor coverings in kitchens and bathrooms, but the rest of the house is now included. As you will probably appreciate, that tenants moving into a new tenancy, one of the biggest expenses they're going to have is carpets and trying to provide some floor coverings, and it's generally the thing that doesn't get installed when they first moved in, and some can never afford to lay carpets and the like. So that's now a requirement within the standard. And we will be looking to make as much use out of existing floor coverings as we possibly can, trying to recycle where possible. The last thing we want to be doing is sending a lot of this stuff into landfill if it's capable of being reused. There are a couple of other things that start to feed into WHQS 23 as well, and that is around water efficiency. So saving rainwater, having a water butt in the back gardens is now a requirement, along with some water saving appliances within the property, which become a requirement as of now, really. So that's a whistle-stop tour through. Quite clearly, there's a bit more detail in the report, and the appendix sets out a summary of what is included within WHQS 23 and how it interacts from the previous incarnation and what's new, and along with some of the time scales. So at that point, I'll take any questions should there be any.
Thank you very much, Mike and Andrew. Do we have any questions? Councillor Lovelock-Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks both for that comprehensive sort of follow-on report to the one laid out in front of us. I just have a couple of questions, points of clarification. So at 2.10 of the report, you've got your first major sort of target of the 31st of March 27. Do we have the resources in terms of trained staff in which to meet this? It says that follow-on is that only at this stage will the full scale of the project be understood. So is it likely that costs could be higher than are already detailed in the report? Yeah. 2.13, the timescale of publishing the revision of the compliance policy, is there one? And that the consultation process, tenants at 32, I think, or 3.2, sorry, tenants are to be consulted. Could you just expand on how tenants are likely to be consulted on these changes or proposals? Thanks very much.
Okay. Thank you very much. In relation to I'm trying to think what it was now. That was it, the surveys and the resources. Initially, we have one trained officer who is capable of undertaking past 20, 35 surveys. And that's not going to be anywhere near enough to achieve what needs to be achieved in the time frame. So we will be reliant upon external consultants in providing a lot of support in visiting all of our properties. we've got 4,000 properties, and we've got 3 years in which to get round them all, and that takes an awful lot of resource, not just in doing the surveys themselves, but also in planning the visits and then inputting that information into the spreadsheets and the databases that will be needed to assess them. The second part of that is that estimation of cost likely to increase? Quite possibly. We don't know where the market is heading at this moment in time. Technology in relation to solar panels and battery is starting to decrease as more, it becomes more popular and more people actually start to use it, but it does become a supply and demand issue. And if every council in the UK or every social landlord in the UK is looking to decarbonise its housing stock, because this is not just an issue that's affecting Wales, it's also across the border in England. There is a commitment to decarbonise, and social housing is being used as the driver to stimulate the private sector as well. So that demand on materials could quite easily increase cost of said materials. So, it's sort of counterintuitive that economies of scale bring about a cheaper cost. It actually also increases demand on the market, which will potentially increase costs. The next one was around the struggling now on what the next one was.
Sorry, Andrew, no, because I rattled through the three. The next one was around the timescale of publishing the revision to the compliance policy. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The timescale for the compliance policy, which will obviously come to committee and this scrutiny, is for next year. So March next year, it's actually set out by Welsh Government in the WHQS standard, and they've given us a year to actually undertake that process. Within the standard as it's set out in legislation, it's not particularly prescriptive, as WHQS 1 wasn't particularly prescriptive. So it allows local interpretation of what that means. So we need to understand what that local interpretation is. I think as the standard sits, then quite clearly there is an intention to provide good quality housing and to decarbonise the housing stock at its simplest level. So if we can bear in mind that that's the aim, then our interpretation of that should really support that aim. And the documentation that we produced for WHQS 1, the compliance policy, supported essentially what was at that stage providing good quality housing that people can be proud to live in. And this develops it onto the next level, which really is about having good quality housing which people can be proud to live in, which is affordable and as energy efficient as it possibly can be. The next question which you asked on there is in relation to how we're going to consult with tenants. We have a number of tenant working groups who are volunteers from the tenant populace, and we go into a lot of detail with those tenants because it's very easy to be able to do that. They are willing volunteers. And a lot of the discussions take place with that tenant body. So that's how we intend to go through and get the tenant voice onto the decisions that we're making.
Thank you. Councillor Lloyd Selby. Councillor Lloyd Selby, are you there?
Hello, apologies. Can you hear me and see me now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, so thank you, Chair, and thank you, Andrew and Mike, for taking us through the report. I've got two questions, if I may, Chair, with your indulgence, but they are actually linked. The report, I think in section 2.5, talks about the implications of the new standards adding an additional 7 days to the letting process, and therefore the knock-on effect in terms of the impact on how long, basically, it's going to take us longer to fill voids. So two things really. First of all, do we have any idea at the moment about what that's likely to mean in terms of pressure on people who were accommodating in temporary accommodation? Because this committee has obviously had a number of conversations about the number of people who are waiting to be housed in permanent accommodation and the cost of that, particularly in relation to use of hotels. So do we have an idea of the impact this is likely to have? And the second part of my question is in relation to our partners, because obviously this doesn't just impact council housing stock, it also impacts all social landlords. And at this stage, do we have any indication from them about the impact they think it will have in relation to their void periods and letting times? Because obviously that can also put additional pressure on us. Thank you.
Okay, if I take on the first part of this, I'm sure Michael will want to come in relation to the hotel accommodation, but it largely is around the installation of the carpets or the floor coverings to the voids, because that is going to be one of the last things that is installed in the void. And it's something that we have somewhere between 5 to 10 voids per week. So we will be using contractors in the first instance to undertake that installation. But it does mean that we'll have possibly 5 to 10, so one to two voids per day being installed with carpets. So we estimate that it will add at least 5 days to that process, and then you've got you're sort of into the weekend again. So we anticipate it's going to be at least a week that is going to add to that process. Quite clearly, once we get into the practicalities of it, we'll understand the process better, and we will seek to make sure that time period is reduced to the minimum it possibly needs to be. And we have sat with the contracting team and the housing team to go through the process in the first instance to make sure that we all understand what we're doing, so that we don't have any unexpected difficulties going through, and there will need to be some changes to the housing tenancy as well, because the carpets will be gifted. So we don't want to be left with an ongoing commitment that once we've installed the carpet, that the tenants come knocking on our door when it wants replacing. This is a first-time offer at the void. For the duration of that tenancy, the tenant then takes over that floor covering. It's not something that we will be looking to maintain going forward. But every time a new tenancy comes along, we will have to consider that carpet flooring or that floor covering. In relation to other landlords, then they will be experiencing very similar things to us. Now, we haven't had conversations with other landlords at this moment in time. Ordinarily, there are 2 or 3 meetings per year with our colleagues in other organisations, and we're awaiting a meeting to be diaried, so we can actually sit down and start and talk about some of these impacts. One of the things that Welsh Government is quite keen to do is make sure that we as local authorities talk amongst each other and share our problems and potential solutions as well. So that's something that will be taking place in the not too distant future, I would have thought. So I can't really answer that one at this moment in time. But at that point, I'm going to pass on to Mike, if that's okay for Mike to pick up on the hotel stuff.
Mike, if you'd like to come in.
Yeah, just to pick up on some of the initial conversation, yes, it will increase the end-to-end process for voids. Andy's mentioned about a week. We are currently undertaking a review of the end-to-end process, which Andy didn't mention. which is around trying to return properties, even without the carpets issue, trying to return properties to stock more quickly because of the issues that Councillor Lloyd Selby has raised. What we also want to do equally is to give some tenant choice, because the last thing in the world we want to do is to install carpets and floor coverings, which, let's face it, a tenant moves into a property, we all have choices. Why shouldn't tenants have the same choices that we would have potentially in our own homes? So, you know, we have done some work with local carpet companies around a range of carpets that fit within the price parameters that we're looking at and within the building, the British standards that the standard requires us to do. So there'll be some pre-work with new tenants prior to moving in terms of trying to choose the appropriate covering and to ensure that as much that process is as efficient as it possibly can be. But undoubtedly it will be longer, I've no doubt, than the current void turnaround process. I think I mentioned earlier that the guidance will morph and change as we run through the practicalities of implementing the standard. And whilst at this stage our understanding is the property has to be carpeted on relet, potentially, I guess, there could be conversations to be had around carpeting being undertaken after the tenant has moved in, although we recognise that that can be an inconvenience for the day that the carpet fitter is there fitting carpets, particularly if furniture has been moved in. But there's no reason that we couldn't look to coordinate that. So I think, as Andrew said, we will learn as we go, and I'm sure the guidance will change as that happens too. But in terms of our reliance on and longer waits for some of our residents in temporary accommodation, yes, it is going to increase potential void costs, both in terms of the fitting itself, but also in terms of an extra week's delay. And obviously that has a knock-on effect then perhaps in terms of some of the costs and occupancy of temporary accommodation. Can I just quickly pick up on some of the questions that were asked earlier, and just to very quickly, in terms of the earlier question, whilst government are funding 6 housing organisations under a pilot scheme in relation to the delivery of the energy pathway, it's looking at a variety of things, including the technology that will be required then to report on the compliance aspect that was mentioned in the second question. We will have to look at a new technology potentially, or to work with our existing or our new technology provider, NEC, to see whether the current housing IT system, which we're in the process of implementing, whether the asset management resource within that can cope with the target energy pathway setting. In terms of engagement, members will shortly receive, if they haven't already, our spring, I think it's our spring, I know it's a little bit late, but our spring tenants newsletter. And I'm pleased to say that the newsletter has been really well received by tenants as well as members, and will be an important opportunity for us to spread the message in relation to WHQS to our tenants. But we will also be doing a number of bespoke events in relation to rolling out WHQS and for tenants to understand how this impacts and affects them. I think in terms of, it's just adding some context around some of the other things that Andrew mentioned earlier.
Thank you. Mike, I actually have a question. It's regarding this pilot you just mentioned. Do you know which organisations are involved in that?
We do. It was a couple of local authorities and a number of other housing associations. Off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly which organisations they are. Some of those organisations are at different stages and are facing different challenges, because I don't think the challenges will be different based on your housing stock, the condition of your stock at the moment, whether you've got the technology, whether you've got the capacity, whether you've got the resources. Welsh Government have made some initial funding available under that pilot programme, and we received some additional funding under the retrofit programme recently that will enable us to kickstart some of the SAP work, survey work, sorry, that Andrew mentioned earlier. No doubt in my mind we will be commissioning external support in order to undertake those surveys. Bearing in mind, this is in addition to what we're doing in the maintenance phase that Andrew has just mentioned, so we will still be tendering for windows, doors, communal areas, outside spaces. So all the stuff that we're doing now, this will be in addition to, and we will need, and I am considering together with Andrew at the moment, the capacity within the existing team to deliver this programme of works. Other local authorities, I know, face the same challenge as us. We don't know what to put in our business plan in terms of, and nor do those local authorities, until we do the target energy pathway planning. At that stage, we will have another conversation with Welsh Government around where do we go from here? Because I have no doubt that there will not be the resources in the local authority, and certainly I would anticipate neither in Welsh Government at this time, to be able to achieve everything that perhaps we and they wish to achieve in the timescales that have been set. So it's not unique to local authority. I know in terms of the landlord meetings that I've had with other housing authority, the other 10 local authorities that have retained stock, we're all in that position. The question of affordability versus aspiration will continue to be a challenge and will become clearer in the next 2 years.
Yes, glad you brought up affordability and aspiration, because that was actually going to be my next point. One of the main concerns about this I have, you mentioned it yourself as well, and so did Andrew, tenants going into fuel poverty, the cost of electricity these days, we're in a cost of living crisis. We don't know how long this is going to be going on for. And in the meantime, things just keep going up in price all the time. We need to find a balance somewhere on what can be done to get to this this SAP 92, but at the same time we need to look after our tenants, and this is where I would like the Welsh Government to give us more information and more help and more advice. So that's all I wanted to say on that matter.
Yes, and Welsh Government do recognise that, and they were working with the sector to better understand that as we go forward. Just on the 6 pilots, we had some feedback from those that are a bit further advanced. The difficulty in achieving SAP 92, just with the measures that Andrew's talked about, a fabric first approach, but with solar and battery, there are properties potentially up the valleys, even in other more urban areas, where even with all of those measures, they will not achieve the SAP 92 rating. Or if they are required to achieve that SAP 92 rating, it would be extremely expensive in order to get you incrementally a little bit higher just to meet that threshold. So there will be a trade-off, I think, at some stage around the viability of the investment versus the outcome that you're going to achieve. Our view is ultimately that has to be paid for. So again, it comes into this question of tenants pay rent, tenants pay for the services, tenants pay for the investment that we make. And there is this balance between what is affordable, as I just mentioned, really about how much we can invest. And that's a challenge. But I think in terms of the aspiration, we are investing for future generations. We're investing in our stock for the future generations that will come after us. This council, as we're aware, is looking to meet that challenge head on in our work under Project Zero and the carbon reduction work that we're doing. It is a challenge. but we're doing everything we can to meet it.
Thank you, Mike. Right, I have Councillor Wilson who has got his hand up. Are committee happy for me to bring Councillor Wilson in?
Yes, Chair.
Well, I see no one dissenting, so come on in, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I think it's been a really interesting discussion. Obviously, as a Cabinet Member for Building Services, I'm obviously, very much aware of what we need to do. And one of my interests here is to make sure that our service is resilient enough to help and facilitate and partly deliver it. I say partly because I think there's a realism here that we need to do it with our partners, including people in the private sector, as well as the rest of the public sector involved in it as well. And I think what Andrew's rightly said, that's the operational manager for building services, is that some of this technology is still relatively new. Ground source heat pumps and heat source pumps, are still relatively new technology. Really, people don't really know about how effective they will be in terms of saving energy. And of course, lots of people are kind of used to existing heating at the moment, which is fairly comfortable. A lot of the technology out there gives it more of an ambient temperature, which is probably slightly not what they're used to. But I think combined with more insulation and other technologies like solar, for example, which is much more well established, I think it will help. But I think it's a learning curve for tenants. It's a learning curve for us as a council moving forward. But what I'm quite interested in is obviously not just the initial costs, which will probably be quite considerable, as Andrew's mentioned, but also making sure that from a maintenance perspective, that those costs ongoing are rather low. And I think that's when it will start to stack up. Obviously, there are developments out there. I visited one myself in St George's Super Ely today. I was very impressed with the technologies being put in some of the houses there. And, I look forward to more of those initiatives going on in the Vale and other parts of South Wales. So I think this is very much keeping all of us posted here. But it's a start of I would say, quite a long journey here, to be honest. But I think it's one where we need to go on because, as you know, look at the weather we've been having recently. I don't think anyone could say this is not climate change. I think it fundamentally is. And I think we've got to do our bit along with everyone else to lessen that impact. So thank you, Chair, for listening.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions on that item? Okay, I see nobody with their hands up. So I will go to the recommendation, that is that committee considers the contents of the report and the implications the changes to the Welsh Housing Quality Standard will have to the council's housing stock and supporting investment programmes. Mark?
All I was going to say, Chair, in terms of that, are committee happy to note, or do they have any comments, etc.?
Councillor Lloyd Selby has got a hand up if you'd like to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Happy to note, but also would like to request that we have a further update. As Councillor Wilson has said, this is a long-term piece of work, but I think given the implications, both in terms of capacity, resources, the impact on tenants, notwithstanding the benefits of the standards, it would be helpful for this committee to have an update at an appropriate time.
Councillor Lloyd Selby, you read my mind. I was about to ask for the very same thing. We do need to make sure that this is going to be for the best for our tenants. We have to protect them. We do need to have updates. Okay, can you please bring that back at a future date? Thank you. Committee, it seems to be that committee are happy to note, but may I just add on that recommendation about bringing it back at a future date, an update? Do we have anyone happy to second that?
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you. Mike?
Chair, I was just going to suggest whether committee would be happy to take a 6-monthly report, an update report, and to place that in your forward work programme.
I would be happy with that. I don't see that anyone in the committee would disagree, but I will ask just to make sure. Is everybody happy with that? Oh, Councillor Lloyd Selby has a hand up.
Yeah, just as the person who made the request, I'm very happy to support that. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. So can we please add that in as well? Okay, thank you. So the next item then is item number 6, Youth Justice and Early Support Services Mid-Year Performance Report. Kirsty, if you'd like to come in. Thank you.
Hi, good evening everybody. Thank you very much for asking me here tonight to provide you with an update in relation to our mid-year performance report. We have circulated the report in advance and within the performance data. Mark's very kindly circulated an additional piece of information in relation to a case study in relation to some of the restorative justice that we undertake, and some photographs, which is before and after examples in relation to some of the reparation activity that we take within the Youth Justice and Early Support Service. It's been a long night for you, so I will try and keep this briefly. Happy to respond to any questions at all at the end. Okay. So in respect of presenting the information on the mid-year performance report within the Vale of Glamorgan, we're looking at the period for scrutiny between April 2023 and September 2023. I may have mentioned on previous occasions that our data is backdated because we have to wait for the intervention to conclude and then the period after that. But in relation to the report, we are required to provide performance information to the Youth Justice Board in relation to national indicators for England and Wales. There's a number of devolved Welsh indicators. And also to provide greater additionality and to ensure that we are able to provide sufficient information in relation to the local context. We also have agreed via our management board that we provide additional local indicators in terms of performance indicators, and there are 3 in relation to those. You'll note from my previous presentation that there have been a number of additional key performance indicators which we are being measured on from April 2023. They range to a vast range of additional matters in relation to management board attendance by partners and further information around special educational needs, disabilities, additional learning needs, serious violence and victims. We have been reporting on victims locally for some time, but in relation to this report, unfortunately, due to national technical software issues between the software provider and the Youth Justice Board data system, there's no published data currently because there's been issues in terms of the accuracy of the data and the systems, complexes in the difficulties within the system, so published data will not be available until 2025. So the report in this sense, in terms of the performance reporting, will be briefer, but we do already have additional reporting on a local level, which we bring to board and we also bring to yourselves. So if we run in through to the data and report, so the first area I wanted to cover is first-time entrants, children who become first-time entrants into the system. So in relation to the data for the Vale, there is an 8.3% decrease in first-time entrance rate compared to the period last year. And overall performance is very positive in this area. So when we compare our first-time entrance figures against across South Wales and other members of the Youth Justice family, there's been an 11% increase in South Wales in terms of first-time entrants and 17.3% across the Youth Justice family in other areas of England. So this is really positive in relation to our data that we're continuing to maintain a decrease in first-time entrants when the trajectory for across Wales and across several areas of England as well is that the first-time entrance rate is increasing. So this is a real success measure in terms of the Vale and something that we are quite rightly proud of. So we have a very strong flexible intervention offer for out of court and diversionary interventions. It's very robust and strengths based, and I think that's really the key in the quality of work that we undertake, and the nature of the trauma-informed practice and the relationship-based work that our staff undertake with children. We've also had some additionality in terms of a further post which was provided by the turnaround scheme, and that was an additional 3-year funding to support local authorities maintaining early intervention programmes. Unfortunately, within that, we have been given notice that this additional funding won't be ending in 2025, and this may inevitably have an impact in terms of capacity in this area of work, which may potentially impact upon first-time entrance rates in the future. This is a national decision. This will be something which will be impacting all youth justice services in England and Wales. So there's just that area that I wanted to point out, but our performance data in relation to first-time entrance is extremely positive. If I move on to the other rates in terms of the binary rate of reoffending and the number of reoffences and reoffenders. So in relation to the national picture, comparison with our national data, there's been an increase in our rate at reporting point. So it's 42.1% in the Vale, compared to South Wales figure of 32.6%, and the across the whole of Wales of 31.1%. So that sounds like there has been quite a significant increase, but we've got to place that in the context of the whole data. So because our first-time entrance rates are low, we have this relates to far few children in the cohort areas. And in comparison to comparable areas, this relates to a much smaller number of children. Therefore, when you have a small number of children with the most complex needs, the percentage increase can appear higher. And in relation to the reoffences in that period, out of the 19 children within the annual cohort, 8 out of the 19 children reoffended, which was the 42%, with a total of 22 reoffences. But actually, when we compare that to local performance information, which we incorporate all our interventions and not just the statutory intervention. So the annual cohort represents the smaller number of statutory interventions. Given across youth justice services and certainly within our own service, the higher level of work is around preventative and diversionary interventions, and that's ranges between us. It can range between 70 and 90%. We include that picture of all the interventions that we undertake with children, not just that very small number on statutory orders. So I think it's more reflective of the work that we undertake generally. So on our local performance information, we have just 6 out of the 33 young people tracked have reoffended in the 9-month period, and this equates to a reoffending percentage of 13.9% in the cohort, which I think, to put in context the initial figure in terms of the annual data and the real picture, which is about our ability to evidence successful outcomes of interventions with all the children we work with, regardless of what the reason is that they refer to our services. So if I take us then to the access to the restorative justice, again, this is an area in relation to ability to contact victims. In relation to this period of time, it relates to 36 identified victims. All of the victim officers attempted to contact all the victims and were successful in receiving responses from all the identified victims. They were all given the opportunity to engage in direct or face-to-face contact and indirect. Following this, there were no victims who wished to receive direct restorative justice. However, 6 received indirect restorative justice. As engagement in restorative justice is voluntary on the part of the victim and the child or young person, this has been a key area for service development. And there's the additional performance measure in relation to restorative justice, which has been included by the Youth Justice Board, is now representing the quality of the offer for victims, not just the number of take-up of victims who wish for direct reparation. So this is now a national measure. However, we had brought this in early. So we did a local audit and we presented to the Youth Justice and Early Support Management Board in relation to evidence in best practice in victim, the work we undertake with victims in restorative justice. We have produced case studies reflecting creative and positive areas of restorative interventions. We're waiting for the published data for the new performance indicator, but I will talk you through some of that in case studies and examples in terms of the positive areas of work in relation to victims and restorative intervention as I go through the report. As a result of how proactive that we've been in relation to the work with victim engagement in the Vale, we did this early and we've made significant progress ahead of the new national standard being implemented. We were contacted by HMIP inspectors in relation to the who were devising the new inspection regime and how to assess in the new inspection framework, which will commence from October 2024, how they can assess effectively the new standards in relation to the quality of work with victims overall, not just the very restrictions based just on the number of victims who wishing to take up direct or indirect reparation. We were able to positively contribute to that. They were impressed in terms of some of the work that we've undertaken and the preparation we've done in advance of that. So we're well on the way in terms of providing quality victim engagement, working towards a best practice guidance. That's now been published by the Ministry of Justice, and we've already I've done significant work ahead of that, and that's an area of strength within the service. So I have provided everybody with some case study data and some photographs in relation to specifically the area of reparation that we undertake with children and young people. So I'd like to talk you through some of the case examples in relation to that, because we do have a very positive and creative approach within the Vale and a very highly skilled reparation and restorative justice officers who are able to undertake really effective work with children. And so sessions take place on environmental awareness issues, beach clean reparation sessions, graffiti removal. An example of this is in relation to recent graffiti removal in the underpass in the vicinity of St Richard Gwyn's Catholic High School. We worked with the head teacher along with the community safety team to contribute to the contextual risks in this location, and also specifically in relation to identified shop owners in relation to the Holton Road area, which is the to which the case study and the photographs will demonstrate. So in relation to some of the direct reparation that we're able to undertake, I'll talk quickly through the second case study, which is related to the before and after pictures in relation to the work that has been undertaken. So our reparations officer, Mark, is working with a young person. He has a traumatic family experiences involved in being moved around different family carers. He experienced repeated abuse. He did not attend school until he was 8 years of age. For the last 2 years, he has lived with the daughter of an aunt's partner and her partner, a young couple in their 20s. He has had very limited contact with his mother, who's currently in prison and has no contact with his father. He has been involved in undertaking high level in terms of numbers of antisocial behaviour and has been receiving support from the Youth Justice and Early Support Service in relation to these areas of antisocial behaviour and in relation to shoplifting offences, which are within the same vicinity. So Youth Justice Service and Early Support Service victim officers contact all identified victims. They worked with the manager of one of the shops in the location and discussed with them the restorative options available. The manager requested some form of direct reparation in relation to this young person. So our reparations officer then was liaised directly with them and asked what they would like us to work with that child to undertake. And what the manager had identified is clearing an area used for parking behind the local shops where there was lots of litter and other refuse. So Mark supported the young person in undertaking this reparation, and the young person worked extremely hard to clear this area to a really high standard. The manager of the store wished to speak with the young person afterwards to thank him personally. However, he felt embarrassed and ashamed, I think, as a result of his previous antisocial behaviour, and so didn't feel able to do that. However, this is something that we are going to continue to work with. So we're building that relationship. We'll continue to undertake work, and it would be really positive if he was to have the opportunity to meet directly with the victim in those circumstances. So in relation to other examples, the reparation offer that we undertake within the Vale.
We've lost you, Kirsty. I'm not sure if you're still there.
Yeah, we'll try and get in touch with Kirsty now, Chair.
Thanks, Mark. Maybe the internet dropped out. It's a possibility. Please just bear with us while we try and get Kirsty back.
Just to inform you, Chair and Committee, Kirsty's just rejoining now.
Okay.
Just bear with me while she rejoins.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Kirsty. Welcome back.
Well, I'm so sorry. The
Not a
link's not
problem.
working. It wouldn't let me back in on the link, so Mark had to resend it. I'm really sorry in relation to that. I've been
It happens to us all.
trying to get back in. So in terms of where you finished, I'm just wondering what point that the link was lost in terms of the case study of the reparation discussion.
I believe, Kirsty, was the second case study you were going through about other examples.
Yeah, thank you. I thought it was at that point. I didn't think it was before that, but I just wanted to check. Yes. So in relation to the second case study, I just wanted to emphasise in relation to the work that we undertake and the role of the reparation officer. So we work in a trauma-informed way, holistically with each child, and this isn't just in relation to the social worker or diversion officer who will work with the child. This is in relation to everybody who will work with that child. So the work that we undertake is taking into account the trauma, and we will work collectively in that trauma-informed way. So, for example, in relation to the second case study, this is a young person from a really traumatic background of complex trauma, unresolved trauma, significant adversity, and really challenging behaviour as a result of that. So not only would Mark work with him at least 2 or 3 times a week in undertaking reparation. In that occasion, the reparation undertaken was indirect reparation, which would be about areas such as clearing litter, areas within beach clean areas, working in relation to gardening projects and other areas in the community identified as part of the reparation projects. But he also built the relationship with that young person. That young person had experienced significant bereavement issues. So part of the work that he undertook is that he would do the reparation with him every weekend. And he would also take him to purchase flowers and take them to put him on his mother's grave in relation to that on a weekly basis. And I think that is just a very small example of a lot of the additional work that is undertaken by the Youth Justice Service. That isn't part of the reparation, but this is the nature of working with children, particularly children experiencing significant bereavement who've got really limited support networks in place, significant histories of trauma. And by that, Mark's able to do really effective work around the offending behaviour, choices and consequences, and also in trying to build those links with that child so that he's able to experience have the positive experience of role modelling of professionals working with him, whilst he's also doing the constructive activity of reparation, feeding back, providing back to the community, also directly to victims. But it forms a much wider part of the intervention of work that we undertake with young people. And that is the approach collectively to all the work that we undertake holistically with children within the Vale. I don't think I've got anything additional in terms of the report. I do apologise for the IT issues again, but I'm happy to take any questions that anybody may have.
Thank you, Kirsty. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Payne. Councillor Payne?
Hello. Thank you. Am I on now?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Kirsty. I don't know if you could hear me just now, but well done on the restorative practices that you're using. It's really looks really good, and they've done lots of hard work. So I am interested in the reward for the young people as well, because you did make a comment about the shopkeeper saying how well they've done and stuff. So is there anything done in terms of that, in terms of, is there any reward, additional reward that the young people can get? Because I see from the case studies, there isn't much parental involvement with these young people. Yeah. So, you know, as in our earlier presentations, using psychologically informed approaches with these young people may contribute to them not reoffending. So is that a thing that you would do?
Yeah, so we will certainly look at how we can use reward and positive reinforcement, and on that basis, we focus as much as the strengths-based approach as we do on the areas of risk and need. And so as part of that, we will try and identify things that the child, young person may be interested in. For example, if there's opportunities they wouldn't have in other areas. So, for example, there's outward bounds type activities. There's a wide range of activities that we will undertake with that child. So we do boulder climbing, we do different sporting activities. We do a wide range of activities in those sense. So what we would try to do in relation to that child in general would be about working holistically about what it is they're interested in, how can we help them get to that point. And so a lot of the work that Mark does, as well as the case manager in relation to that, is about working towards that. So he will go above and beyond and do the things which really matter to that child. We will try and build the family connections where we can. We'll look at offering reward systems where we can within budgetary restrictions, but we will give the time and the space and the care, and we will always take opportunities we can to really help that child with their individual development, and where possible, where we can look at some educational or employability attainment, and that's where we have that very strong reparation offer, because we look at then, okay, you've got the skills in doing some of these areas, that what can we do in terms of other areas of work, what can we do in terms of trying to support you in terms of your future career aspirations or your employability, because often young people who with really complex needs haven't necessarily got that experience of success, and it takes a lot of mentoring support in relation to being able to get that child to a position where they are able to undertake employment and training opportunities. And another example in relation to Mark, that so he's done children who are in independent accommodation, where they might have issues in relation to, of course, criminal damage in their rooms. He will undertake work outside of that. He's helped them in terms of using the sessions to decorate their room, paint, take pride, and even down to a session of cleaning the sink, trying to build independent living skills and showing him, this is now, we've got this in your room, we build and support and help you with it, but how can you maintain that? So it's somewhere that you can be proud of and you can kind of have that pride in yourself, and really working. And that young person was contacting Mark outside of his sessions. He was showing him pictures of what he'd done. He'd got another friend to come and help him with it. So I think those things are really heartwarming to me, because I can see the real value of not just the reparation and him making amends for undertaking the criminal damage in him, but also gaining a sense of pride and support in somebody who's caring, supporting him and showing an interest and trying to help him have those life skills to be able to move forward effectively and successfully.
Thank you, Kirsty.
Thank you very much, Kirsty. Does anybody else have any questions? If not, I do have a comment I want to make, but I shall let other people go first if they want to speak. No. Okay, well, first of all, I want to say thank you very much, Kirsty, for that. It's, as always, very informative, very entertaining in a way as well, when you hear of all the things that staff are doing to help out and the examples you give, the care that your staff have for these children. It's amazing. Every one of us needs a Mark in their lives, I think. He is seems to be some kind of miracle worker, and I'd love to pass on our heartfelt thanks to him for doing what he's doing and helping these children. It takes a special kind of person to do things like that, especially going out their way like he is. Yeah. That is everything I wanted to say about that. Thank you. So if nobody else has anything they would like to say, then I will go on to the recommendation, which is that this committee consider the contents of the performance report. Everybody happy with that? Yeah, happy to know? Happy to note. Councillor Lovelock-Edwards has seconded. Anybody else? No. Okay. Well, in that case then, I want to say thank you very, very much for everybody coming here tonight. Just under 2 hours. I think we've done fairly well. There's been a good bit of discussion. So I will say thank you again for coming. Go and enjoy the rest of your evening. And the next meeting is scheduled for the 15th of May. But before you pop off, Mark does have a word to say.
Only a quick one, Chair, just to confirm about the urgent items for part 1, part 2, Chair. There isn't anything just for...
I knew I was forgetting something. No, I have no urgent items under part 1 or part 2. So thank you. Okay, thank you for coming, guys. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much.